Rabbi Hartman.
Good morning.
Good morning. Such an honor to be with you. We know that the trauma of the past 18 months has brought with it such complexity, such uncertainty, and a great deal of conflict and disagreement. I wanted to ask you about something that you wrote about in a recent article in the Sources Journal, where you referenced Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I wanted to ask you about the idea that we cannot address questions, perhaps we cannot address questions about how to be our best selves, either on an individual level or a national level, if we don't have our needs for security met. And I wanted to ask you to talk about how fear might define the conversation as well as our actions for Americans and Israelis.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Just a light question to start with.
The responsibility of Jewish life is to overturn the Maslow hierarchies. Fear is not new for the Jewish people. It's not new. Which Jew in Jewish history hasn't been frightened? We have to figure out how to be who we are supposed to be despite that fear. And it makes Jewish life not simple, because we could become cynical and we could become morally mediocre very quickly. When people hate you, it's easy to vilify them. It's easy for your anger to define you as a person. That's all you are. When you get into defense mode, you shut down. Now, Maslow says that's what you should do. It's not Maslow says. Darwin teaches that survival requires of you to concentrate first and foremost on yourself. But if that's the way we were as a people, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't. We are the descendants of a people who, in the midst of the most horrific hatred and suffering, never lost our humanity. We represented, for thousands of years, the best of what the human condition could be. That's us. That's who we were. And so we're faced that moment again. Now, it's not as bad today as it was 75 years ago, 80 years ago. The difference is that we got used to living without fear. For most of Jewish history, fear was a constant companion. We are coming off of 40, 50 years of a golden era where in North America we were the most beloved minority. Do you know why there's intermarriage today? As distinct for much higher than over the last 2,000 years. Not because Jews are less committed, but because non-Jews are willing to marry Jews. For most of Jewish history, no one would even think of marrying a non-Jew. Why would you want to marry a non-Jew? You want to check out a pogrom? Like, what would be your inclination? Like, you'd be insane. We have 40, 50 years of privilege. And in many ways, since 1967, when Israel's War of Independence finally came to an end, and really the War of Independence was won in 1967, with the slight hiccup of the 73 war, which passed without social media. So by the time, we got really frightened about what could have happened. Some of the generals, had nervous breakdowns, but we only, in retrospect, they were that close, but we didn't know it in real time. We have lived with unprecedented Jewish power. Unprecedented Jewish power. Where not only did we feel safe, we were victorious. Where we felt that we could control our reality. Where the status quo is sustainable simply by our power. We're the masters of our universe. That's what we felt. And along comes October 7th and realizes or teaches us how precarious your existence is. And Israelis, even though, and I speak about this to Israelis all the time, we had a very different October 8th than you did. Your October 8th was the beginning of your trauma. When people on October 8th started to blame Israel for October 7th. But our October 8th was when the army showed up. And when the army showed up, the existential threat was contained. And we moved to the offense. And while we have been trying, and the government is trying to somehow erase October 7th, that you can't do. Israel is more secure today than it was on October 6th. But psychologically, it's still a traumatized society. And I'm trying. I'm talking, I'm teaching, I'm speaking to hundreds and thousands of Israelis. When are we going to remember that we are October 8th Jews, not just October 7th Jews? And they're having a hard time doing so. They're having a very, very hard time. It's like I'm surprised how stuck we are. And maybe it's because we were so privileged that there's those extra layers of defense, that those calluses that Jews developed for thousands of years, we sort of lost them. And the question is, how do we reclaim them? Because if all we do is fight and struggle and worry about the lower level of the Maslow pyramid, that's not Israel. That's not my Israel. That's not my Judaism. And it's a tough time.
I would love to ask you to help us translate Israeli Jewishness for an American audience. It seems that the tensions and debates in Israel there's some overlap, there's some differences between the tensions and debates in our American culture. What do you think is most important for us as American Jews to know about the mood in Israel and how Israelis are thinking and feeling right now?
I'll share with you what's the most important for me. I don't know if it is the most important. There's a huge gap between North American Judaism and Israeli Judaism. North American Judaism is built and premised on liberal values. Liberal values are Jewish values. You live in a liberal Jewish environment in which the best of the modern world doesn't challenge Judaism, gets integrated into Judaism, and it becomes Judaism. We taught principles to the world, and we learned principles from the world. And that becomes our Jewish life. Human rights, commitment to religious pluralism, a pursuit of peace, the primacy of the ethical. All of these are cornerstones of liberalism. Democracy. They're now Jewish values. That's your Judaism. Now, it's true, we have chapters in our tradition that support that, but they didn't start from within the Jewish tradition. They found a comfortable home amongst liberal Jews of North America. There are very few liberal Jews in Israel. Or, let me be more precise, there's a very thin space for liberal Judaism. There are Jews who are liberal, just like there are Palestinian Israelis who are liberal. But those who speak from within the Jewish tradition, at least half, as distinct from North America where it's 10%, at least half believe that Judaism and liberalism are in competition with each other. And that liberalism is an assimilating, corrupting influence on Judaism. And we have a cultural war going on in Israel. We have a cultural war as to which Judaism is going to win. So when a moment like October 7th happens, it shrinks liberal commitments, and you don't have a Jewish tradition to fall back upon. And the forces of illiberalism become more dominant. And there's certain things that would be self-evident to you as a Jew. Like, you can't be a Jew without worrying about minorities. You can't. I'm not saying whether you should be Republican or Democrat, but you think about that question, because you actually remember that we were minorities. And you're supposed to love the stranger because you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. That's like the ABC of North American Judaism. You actually define Judaism in one of the most beautiful ways, I believe, ever defined in Jewish history. The core definition of Judaism in North America is that to be a good Jew is to be a good person. Now, that answer was derided for many years. Oh, just to be a good person. Then why not marry a good Christian who's also a good person? And like I'm married, like all that stuff. But it's actually the best. Like, if you'd ask me which religion you'd want to belong to, and there's one religion that says, you know what I really care about is if you're a good person, I'm in. Like, what better answer? What more noble calling could a religion have than to say you are the good people? You stand for good things. And that's not self-evident in Israel. It doesn't mean that Israelis aren't good people. But their perception of Judaism is dominated much more by certain denominations, certain illiberal political and religious denominations. And as a result, when we are confronted by fear, by danger, we don't have as much of a religious tradition to support us. And one of my jobs, one of my key tasks in life, is how do I spread liberal Judaism in Israel? Get Jews who are liberals to realize that they have to engage in liberal Judaism. More Israelis want freedom from religion than freedom of religion, in which liberalism dominates their discourse. And so we are in very different communities. And along comes a war like this. And it started even from the Second Intifada, when we just gave up on certain moral conversations. We just gave up on them. We don't talk about peace. We don't talk about Palestinian rights. Now, and the prophetic liberal voices aren't as powerful in Israel as they are here. So there are certain self-evident values that you connect to here. And by the way, it's easier to do so from 6,000 to 10,000 miles away. When you're there and you know that 80% of Gazans and 80% of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, as distinct from Palestinian citizens of Israel, all celebrate and support the massacre of October 7th. It's very hard for you to feel compassion or to want to activate any sense of moral responsibility. And so this gap, how do we activate the best of our tradition to inspire us? Because that's what religion is supposed to do. Whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, every religious tradition aspires to combat the human propensity to mediocrity. That's what religion is supposed to do. We have great potential, but we tend to mediocrity. That's human beings. From the first moment that we walked on earth, that's why Genesis is such an interesting book. Because it's all mediocre people. All a bunch of mediocre people. Abraham rises above a little bit from time to time and then falls back down. But with the exception of Abraham, it's a bunch of mediocre people. At best, that's our ancestors. Like our forefathers and mothers. But the Bible, it's real. It tells you that being the chosen people doesn't mean you're superior. It means you're mediocre. But our tradition expects you to strive to greatness. That's what religion does. That's what Jesus does. The core idea of Jesus, who offers to you salvation, challenges you not to succumb to sin which, while inevitable, doesn't have to define you. When Luther speaks about the freedom of a Christian, it's the freedom from being saddled by guilt. Know that you're loved and take that love as an inspiration to go further. Don't worry, you're not in the wrong program this morning. And Muhammad does the same thing. The exact same thing. He challenges you. He challenges you to overcome your sense of individual interest and to recognize that a life of value is in a life of service of God, who challenges you to live a life of moral and spiritual greatness. Every religious tradition, this is what we do. In Israel, our religious tradition doesn't play that role to the degree that it needs to play. And part of the great challenge of building a future for Israel is to build the Judaism that could inspire us instead of mediocritizing us, which is where very often Israeli society or religion in Israeli society finds itself. And you feel it precisely when you go to war. You feel it precisely when your life is in danger. What resources do you have? And right now, those who speak in the name of Judaism are more often than not those who are calling to fight another day, to only care about Jewish lives, to celebrate power. We have a cultural war in Israel that we need to win, and we haven't yet. Besides defeating Hamas, we haven't won this war either.
You've been articulating your vantage point where the Hartman Institute is advocating for liberal and moral Zionism and also for pluralistic Judaism. And I want to ask you to define what the limits of pluralism are in pluralistic Judaism as you see it, and who, if anyone, is outside of that tent.
Great question. I'll tell you the boundaries that I set at the Hartman Institute since October 7th. Because we have people from the whole spectrum of Jewish political positions, and we have a growing Israeli-Palestinian presence in the Institute, working on shared society between Jews and Israeli Palestinians. Remember, 20% of Israeli citizenry are Palestinian Israelis, 20%. And so I have settlers on the one side, I have center-right, left, I even have some anti-Zionists. They're all there. I have Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, Renewal, Post-Denominational, and Secular. It's like, there's the 10 sons of Haman. So like you have to learn how to say, I have all of them. I even ordain. I have a rabbinic school where I ordain Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Secular rabbis, men, women, gay, straight, all in my rabbinic school. So after October 7th, and there was a lot of turmoil, people wanted to know where people stood on this or that. And everybody, especially when you're frightened, you want to know who's with you and who's against you. And so I brought the whole institute together and I said, these are our boundaries. If you believe that October 7th didn't happen, or if you believe that Israel doesn't have a right to defend itself, you have no place at the Hartman Institute. No place. I'm not interested, by the way, a little footnote saying that you believe Israel has a right to exist. That's a meaningless statement because no state has a right to exist. Human beings have inalienable rights. States either exist or don't exist. So people could say Israel exists, but still believe that we don't have a right to defend ourselves, which means that you're the enemy of the Jewish people. So the whole notion whether it has a right to exist is just the wrong question. Do we have a right, like every other country in the world, to fight a just war of self-defense? Is a war of self-defense for the sake of Israel a moral act or not? That's the first. If either of those you reject, we're a Zionist institution, you have no place here. I'm not saying you can't be a citizen of Israel, you just have no place at the Hartman Institute. If, on the other hand, you believe that only Jews were created in the image of God and only Jewish lives matter, you have no place at the Hartman Institute. If in the middle of that, you think the war should continue, you think the war should end, you think Israel's committing war crimes, you think Israel is the epitome of morality, pick it all. You want to occupy Gaza, you want to leave Gaza. You're part of my moral conversation. So my boundaries are really moral ones. And it applies also within Jewish denominations. It's just so much against my nature and against my Judaism to kick people out. It's not a menschlich thing to do. My basic instinct as a liberal Jew is to allow somebody to define themselves. You defined yourself, and it's my job to align myself in light of your definition. That's why all the shtick around pronouns never bothered me. You tell me you're no problem. It's not my problem. Who you say you are obligates me, no problem. What type of Judaism you live obligates me. To walk with God is to recognize that you know nothing. Unfortunately, people believe that to walk with God is to get certainty. That's not a religious person. A religious person knows that they're not God. That's the first. To believe in God is to recognize that you're not God. And that obligates you to walk not humbly with God, to walk humbly with other human beings, to just listen to them. Because we're all just sort of struggling to find some decency and meaning in our life. And if you're on that struggle, and if you see yourself as part of the Jewish people, and if you see yourself in some way a part of Judaism, from my perspective, you're in. The boundaries are moral decency. Not Jewish. You're a Jew. Ben-Gvir is a Jew. I would never invite him into the Hartman Institute because he's a fascist. And fascism believes that Jewish lives and the state of Israel come before any moral obligations to others. So he's not my conversation partner. But, by the way, I have students who come to learn at the Hartman Institute who are Ben-Gvir supporters. And so that creates challenges. Because if somebody comes to study, I also never kick somebody out. If you're in there, I'm a teacher. Let's talk, as long as it's of some value. So those are the boundaries that I struggle with. And in that, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I feel secular Judaism, Reform, conservative are as authentic as Orthodoxy is. And myself, I am center-left to left in Israeli politics. I believe that Likud, there, from the right, from the center-right to the left, there's a whole spectrum of moral, valuable, intelligent perspectives on what needs to be done, in which none of us know, and we should talk to each other, and the more we talk, we're going to learn. And then there's the extremes that they hate me so much anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So I tell them I rejected you first.
Well, thank you. I have one more question for me before we open it up to our audience. Some might say that Jewish text study, our learning and our Jewish traditions are a luxury in this moment of urgency. And I would love to hear you speak to how it is that our traditional text and our traditional methods of studying, or the studying that you are doing at Hartman Institute and the work that you're doing there, speaks to this moment and to us.
First of all, it is a luxury. It is a luxury. And at different points in my life or in the life of my country and of my students, when we were called, we went to war. Of course, there's, when the war started, the first thing I said to all my faculty, all programs at the Hartman Institute, said, nobody has to do anything. If you do something, it still has to be excellent. But from now on, nobody has to do anything. If you can't show up for work, don't show up for work. Don't worry. For months. If you have a son, a daughter, a husband, a wife, a grandchild, fighting, don't show up. Well, you just do whatever you want to do. If coming to work is good for you, come to work. If coming to work is not helpful for you, don't come. If coming to work and not working is good for you, then that's exactly what you do. And I did this for months. For months. So of course it's, because the first issue is just taking care of people. Issue number one is to defend my country, to defend our lives. And the second thing is taking care of people. It's like people were coming just crying every day. So of course studying text is a luxury. And I basically suspended it for months. And I said every curriculum that I approved, and we're a very, very large, we have 400 employees. We run hundreds and hundreds of programs. I said every single curriculum that was approved on October 6th is no longer approved. You can't teach what you were ready to teach on October 6th. Nobody. Nobody's allowed to get up and teach the class that they were ready to teach on October 6th. Because the first thing you have to do is forget the text, actually talk to people. The program should be, how are you feeling? How are you getting through the day? And while the soldiers, later we had soldiers who come back, all the people who are there, who aren't sleeping, so text is an absolute luxury. But at the end of the day, and this is part of our challenge, there's the moment when the war erupts, and then there's by March, when Hamas has lost its military capacity. Not its policing capacity, but its military capacity. Its missiles, etc., its command and infrastructure. And when Israel, just as a little footnote, says, yes, we bombed 160 military installations, unless a toothpick is a military installation that has to be dissected, there are no military installations. And this is just yesterday, after 508, at some point, people started to breathe. Then comes the question that I started with. Who do we want to be? How does October 7th not define us? It stays with us, but who do we want to be? And how do we begin to think about Gaza tomorrow, Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank tomorrow, and Israel tomorrow? Because at the end, that's why we're fighting. I could live in Israelis, a lot of us have passports, dual, a lot of Jews in Israel came from other places. And except for those who came from Arab states, they actually have passports in place. They can have access to passports. We could live elsewhere. Why live in Israel? My love of Israel is because Israel represents the challenge of the Jewish people to build an exemplary society in a terrible neighborhood. But to build something, that's why I almost died for my country. Literally almost died for my country when I was a tank commander and my tank blew up. And I was no reason in the world that I should be alive. And I didn't welcome it, but I was willing. I was willing to die for Israel. I wasn't ready for my kids to die. I can't say that. But I was willing to let them serve and just deny the consequences. I'm all in. I'm all in. In my high schools, we educate our kids to the highest level of service possible. 30% of those in our boys' school become officers. We have the only Orthodox school in Israel, the only one, girls' school, in which military service is the default. To the defense of Israel, I am all in. And there's no difference in my commitment to the viability and security of Israel. But I'm all in, not because I want to just live. I could live elsewhere. And I know anti-Semitism has gotten worse, but I'm not really. I walk around with my kippah just about anywhere in America. I was the only kippah in your airport yesterday. The only kippah, and it's actually a schlep. There's like a long walk. It's like I don't know, like I was just walking and walking and walking and walking. And I'm walking, and I'm the only keeper in the Durham airport. And I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I could live here. I could live here. And I could be safe here. But I'm all in for whatever Israel demands of me and my family and my kids and my cousins and my nephews and all of us, because I want to build something great. And text study is not text study. Text study is speaking to 3,000 years of Jewish wisdom and asking them, what could I learn from you? There's a lot of chapters that are mediocre and a lot of chapters that are evil, and I have to read them too, and I have to find those chapters that could serve as my inspiration. So I then invite people. And, like one of the nicest moments over the last year was when all the commanding medical officers of the Israeli army, in the middle of the war, came for a day to study what are our values and morality in times of war. They literally left the battlefield. They said, this, as medical officers, this is what we have to do. And so we also talked and we studied texts, but we're engaging with how do we become the best of us? And that's a luxury, but in my world, that's an existential need.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take some questions from the audience.
The first and the last should be the first question and the last question, and then the rest of them, I've ordered them, but if you get the five, just skip to the last one.
Thank you.
Why?
Now you can be able to hear me. Could you hear me now? Good.
Okay, our first question from the audience is, why come to Durham? We are grateful but curious. Why Durham?
When you become the president of an institute, you work for everybody. They told me to come. You want to know the truth? I'm like, I come to the United States and Canada 4 or 5 times a year, and they put you on my calendar. But that's the truth. I didn't even know where I was coming. I knew I was landing. I went to the American Airlines, asked where I said, I'm going to Charlottesville, North Carolina. I grew up in Canada and Israel, so I don't even know where I am on the map. I know there's something called the Southeast, and I understand I'm part of that because there's no time zone shift. But I don't mean to be disrespectful. It's my ignorance. Why here?
You're good.
I'm good? But that's the technical reason. The other reason is that I love the Jewish people. My job, the greatest honor of my life is to serve the Jewish people. That's the way I define the Hartman Institute. Our job is to serve the Jewish people. That's all. The greatest honor is to be a shaliach tzibur, to be someone who serves the people. But that's the highest level you can. So I love my people. And everybody's been nice. And part of the job of when I started Shalom Hartman Institute North America, we originally had Shalom Hartman Institute Israel, and we had American Friends of the Shalom Hartman Institute. And we shifted it 15 years ago. And when I hired then the president of Shalom Hartman Institute North America, and now my co-president of the Institute, Yehuda Kurtzer, we shifted to Shalom Hartman Institute North America and said, what are our responsibilities here? So I'm responsible for you too. And if I could be, or we can be, of benefit, now we can't be everywhere. But again, 12 people came last summer, we met each other, and you forced us. And you said, come come meet us. And I'm here. And if you feel that the Hartman Institute could be a part of enabling you to live a life of meaning and with greater commitment to Israel, we're here to be a part, we're here to serve you. We can't do it always by me coming, sometimes with Zoom and sometimes it's in other ways. But the strength of the Jewish people is that we're a people and we care about each other. And there's also a lot of things, there's a lot of wisdom and things that you're learning. What does it mean to be a minority community? What does it mean to live in the midst of realities that people in other parts of the Jewish world don't know about? You have a lot to teach and you have a lot to learn. So this is my first, I think once I was in a place called Greensboro. Once might have been somewhere over the last 2 decades, but anything pre-corona has lost its timestamp. Somewhere, but if you continue to invite, not just me, but I mean if you continue to turn to the Institute and say, you're important to us, we need you, we will find a way to talk to you. So today, I'm here because they told me. The next trip will be in your hands.
What do you think American Jews can or perhaps should do to combat anti-Semitism at home and to support Israel?
There's so many parts to that question. The first thing is don't try to understand it. Don't try to explain it. Anti-Semitism is not the result of anything that Jews or Israel did. It is an evil. It is a manifestation of the human capacity for evil. Just understand that. We have that capacity. And there are individuals who their propensity to evil manifests itself in hating Jews. Just understand first where it comes from. You're not responsible, you're not guilty. And those who started to celebrate October 7th on October 8th didn't do so because we are occupying the West Bank. First is just to understand that. It's evil. And the first thing you do when you encounter evil is you fight it. How is the second question, but to understand that as Jews, we just simply fight evil. Whether it's a terrorist who wants to kill my kids, or whether it's somebody who believes that the murder of Jews is a day to celebrate, they're evil. And each one of us has to use whatever power we have. We might have military power, we might have political power, we might have economic power, we might have educational power. Yeah, everything you can use. That's one. There's so many parts to this. A second is don't over-exaggerate the anti-Semitism. See it for all the evil and danger that it poses, but see it for what it is and not for what it is not. Be very careful from either projecting the past on the present or feeling that because something might become something, therefore it is that now. Now, why is that so critical? First of all, it's critical because if you expand it, it's going to define your whole existence. Fighting anti-Semitism is part of Jewish life. It's not the content of Jewish life. But if you expand it more than it is, it will consume everything that you do. And you will become mediocre. You will become mediocre. It will affect you. And we can balance them, but it requires, just like in Israel, I have to see Hamas for what it is. But look, I could also recognize Israel's power, and all of a sudden I could ask, so what are my responsibilities? I have to balance them. The second, when you over-exaggerate it, it will consume everything and every conversation that you have. And why be Jewish will cease being a question that you are searching for answers for. The other part is when you overexpand it, you include a lot of people who aren't anti-Semites into the anti-Semitic camp. There are a lot of people who are no longer allies of Israel and the Jewish people. But we could win. We can win them back. There are the anti-Semites, a plague on all their houses. And they're not listening to anything you have to say. They're not listening to my lectures there's nothing that you're going to say that somebody who believes that Israel is the only country in the world which doesn't have a right to defend itself, and those who murder our people are heroes. Since I'm a rabbi, there's certain words that I won't use right now because I don't know you well enough to know your sensitivities. But back home, I would feel very comfortably speaking in words that start with the letter F. Really? Really? I have no, all I do is I want to marginalize you, I want to weaken you, and I'll do anything in my power to limit your ability to affect my life, to affect the life of my children, and to corrupt America. Because you are corrupting America. It is an evil which is contagious. But there's a lot of people who are angry at Israel right now. Not October 8th condemners, November 15th condemners of the war. By the way, most Israeli Palestinians, most Palestinian citizens of Israel are in that camp. There's almost a universal condemnation of October 7th. Everybody recognizes they condemn what Hamas did. But at some point they said, this is no longer a just war being fought justly. It's now a war that was just and not being fought justly. Great. Now, again, whether that's true or not, that's an argument. Now, there's a lot of people who feel that way. I struggle with that, for those of you, on an ongoing basis. I think the war should have been over by May. By May. And tens of thousands of people were killed. I think it's one of the most just wars in Jewish history. But a just war has to be fought justly. Now, there are people who are asking serious questions. They're not the enemies. But when you expand anti-Semitism too broadly, we are losing huge swaths of allies and friends. And we don't know how to talk to them. And we have litmus tests and words that are being used. And we're hypersensitive. And we should be, because very often they use the similar words that the anti-Semites are using. Because those are the words that are common in the conversation. But we have to be very careful. Because if we're going to win, we're not going to win by being alone. There's only 15 million Jews in the world. That's it. Truth is, Judaism failed. Right? Christianity and Islam, 1.5 billion. Like the three great monotheistic traditions. Really? Like, numbers do count. So there's this great dilemma going on in Israel right now. Because in Israel, anytime someone criticizes Israel, they're anti-Semites. We use the anti-Semite card to neutralize any criticism, whether it comes from a Jew or a non-Jew. It's just immediate. You criticize anti-Semite, anti-Shemi, it's just automatic. But Israel came in first place in the popular vote in the Eurovision. That's a song contest, which is meaningless, and it's not a big deal by you. But in Europe, it's actually a big deal. So we've been told look at the demonstrations, they're all anti-Shemim, anti-Shemim, anti-Shemim. What happened? How come all these anti-Shemim voted for our song? So nobody knows what to do right now. So the right wing are saying, oh no, there really were supporters of Israel and the governments are, we just don't know what to do. But that's just trivial. There's great friends of Israel. Republicans, Democrats, liberals, progressives. It's legitimate to struggle with what Israel is doing. And we need to develop different calluses, thickness of skin. And remember that in our tradition, criticism is an act of love. Under Jewish law, one of the 613 commandments, just like kashrus and Shabbos, is if you see somebody doing something wrong, you are halachically obligated, legally obligated to talk to them and to critique them. Leviticus 19, it's right there. That means we have to learn how to do this in the midst of being attacked. And it's hard, and I don't envy, and I'm not belittling it, but I would say you have to fight anti-Semitism as if our lives depend on it, and recognize at the same time that the fight against anti-Semitism right now in America is not as existential as it used to be, and that there's a lot of people who fall under that umbrella, including Jews, who fighting won't help, but texts, convincing, learning, moral conversation might help.
Donniel, I wanted to ask, or somebody in our audience wants to ask you, what about Israel are you most proud of these days? What do you think we can talk about regarding Israel to our non-Jewish and sometimes even our Jewish friends who don't appear open to hearing anything good or positive about Israel?
So first of all, don't try to say, if somebody's not open, our tradition says that just as is it a mitzvah to say that which will be heard, so is it a mitzvah not to say that which won't be heard. You have to know who you're talking to. So if somebody's not open and you want to talk about this little light, it's like you're irrelevant. I think the greatest thing about Israel is our aspirations. That's what you should talk about. You should talk about your aspirations for Israel. You should talk about your Israel. And if they say to you, well, that's not what Israel's doing, then you say, I know. Just like in the United States, there is a government which doesn't necessarily represent my Israeli Zionist values. It's not my Israel. And I have allies in Israel. And those allies stood up against judicial reform, and right now they're traumatized, but they're there. And it's true. Present yourself not as the person who's on a PR campaign to sell the beauty of Israel, but be the advocates of the Israel that you love. Bear witness to it. Talk about it. That we're not always implementing it. Welcome to life. Welcome to life. To present Gaza as the most morally fought war, it's going to be tough, especially with people who don't know and who don't understand the unbelievable complexity of the battle zone called Gaza. So it's just speak about what Israel means for you. Speak about what you aspire for. Speak about the Israel you're fighting for and ask them to join. That, when President Biden called himself a Zionist, that's what he meant. You don't have to agree with everything. There's something. Yes, Israel is a country that aspires to be a light, to live by the highest moral standard, to respect all human life. We are in the midst of an existential war against an enemy that knows no bounds. It's that war now has brought us down a couple of rungs. But the greatest thing about Israel is its people. And its people are greater right now than its government. And that type of language, tell them about your journey. Tell them about your struggle. Be a character witness of how a decent moral person could still love Israel today. It's not about telling them something, it's about showing them something. Showing them who you are. Some will not listen, some will walk away. And it's true. Until in which time we don't have another government. Until in which time ultranationalists or fascists aren't in our government. It's hard to sell the moral righteousness of Israel. It's hard. And everybody will have even President Herzog, who's about as sweet and nice a person as you're going to find. He actually also believes that to be a good Jew is to be a good person. When the war started on October 7th, he said Hamas is Amalek. That was like, so now they're going to be able to quote it for you, and thank God you're not on these BBC debate things on YouTube or whatever. That's like, if you get into that, don't go there, because no, it doesn't matter. Just facts don't matter also, remember that. Nobody shapes their opinions on the basis of facts. They pick the facts that mirror their opinions. So it just does, you don't have a single fact that can make a difference to anyone. Understand that. To your kids, nobody. Just talk about the greatness of Israel that you aspire for, and the partners in Israel that you are aspiring for together. And God willing, we'll win. But we have to win. Because if we don't win, at the end, liberal Jews will have difficulty having a relationship with an illiberal Jewish state. So someone like me at my age, I'm 66, I'm there forever. I will never leave Israel or never stop fighting for it. But other people will say, what do I need this for? This is just not my Judaism. This is not my democracy. This is not my values. And that's why the fight for the future of Israel is so urgent. It's a big deal. And I think we can win. But there's one thing we have to believe, is that we have the time. Because it's not a simple political solution. The sovereign in democracy is the citizen. And we need to work very intensively with the Israeli citizen to get them reconnected back to that larger vision of themselves.
Donniel, our last question is very much related to what you're speaking about now.
Are we okay, by the way? Yeah. You're okay? I haven't made anybody here unbelievably upset. Or if you are, I have a feeling you're going to find me later. Yeah.
We'll hear about it. We'll hear about it. Yeah. If you haven't made anybody upset, then you haven't really done your job. What do you think is the Israel of tomorrow?
Oh, that's easy. That's easy. The Israel of tomorrow is an Israel which lives side by side with the Palestinian state in peace and security, where Palestinians have a right to sovereignty just like we do. I yearn for that as a Zionist, as a Jew. If I care about my sovereignty, what's hateful unto you, don't do unto others. That's the whole Torah, Hillel teaches us. Being pro-Palestinian state is an essential part of my Zionism and Judaism. Not because I want Israel to be a democracy, because I want Palestinians to have a life of dignity and freedom, like I have, because that's what I'm supposed to be as a Jew. So for me, that's there. It's an Israel which stops running issues of state and religion as if Israel's a private shul. We're very diasporic in Israel. Everybody wants to be the chief rabbi of their synagogue. But now in North America, we have lots of synagogues. If you don't like the synagogue that you go to, and somehow ideologically it doesn't fit, what do? You go to the shul next door. Well, somebody decides Israel's my private shul. It's my private shul. And I'm going to be the chief rabbi of the shul. And I'm going to decide who converts. And I'm going to decide how you get married. And I'm going to decide how you get buried. And I'm going to decide what rituals you perform and what you learn. Well, in my Israel, it's the homeland of the Jewish people in which everybody's Judaism is respected. Everybody has a place. Everybody, I could tell you stories, but we don't have the time, where everybody has a right to join Judaism in accordance with their religious beliefs and commitments, that they could encounter Jewish texts and Jewish ideas that reflect and represent their beliefs. And finally, my Israel, the Israel of tomorrow, will be an Israel in which public policy lives, whether it's between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, whether religious or secular, whether it's between Jew and non-Jew, lives by the principle of what is hateful unto you, don't do unto others. That's the whole Torah. All the rest, God is bored. It's like, really? You think God says, I want a goat? Like, that's what you think I need a goat? Or I need I need a goat? Yeah, give me a goat. I need a goat. That's what the prophet said. I don't give a crap about your goats. What fix your moral. So that's my Israel. And the Israel of tomorrow is not an Israel where any of this is necessarily fulfilled, but it's an Israel in which we are on the journey to do so. It was really nice being with you. Thank you.